The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the kitchen of the Anderson home on a quiet Saturday morning in Millbrook, a serene town in upstate New York. Martha, the 68-year-old matriarch, gazed out the window at the activity in the garden, her eyes fixed on the animated figures moving across the lush green lawn. Outside, Sunshine, the family's golden retriever, was running joyfully after her only puppy, Ray. The little dog, just 3 months old, was the last of the 5 she had given birth to last spring. His siblings had already found new homes, but Ray had stayed, quickly becoming the family's darling. Martha sighed, adjusting her glasses on her nose. Her face, marked by time, maintained a neutral expression, almost indecipherable. She had never been particularly fond of animals, but something about that scene touched her in a way she couldn't explain. "Grandma, aren't you going to have coffee?" asked Tommy, her 12-year-old grandson, entering the kitchen with messy hair and still in his pajamas. "I'm coming, dear," Martha replied, turning to her grandson with a shy smile. "I was just observing the commotion outside." Tommy approached the window, his eyes shining as he watched Sunshine and Ray playing. "They're amazing, aren't they, Grandma? Look how Sunshine takes care of Ray." Martha nodded silently, unable to share her grandson's enthusiasm, but also reluctant to diminish his joy. At that moment, Sarah, Tommy's mother, and Martha's daughter entered the kitchen. At 42, she was the living image of energy and optimism. "Good morning, family. What a beautiful day, isn't it?" "Mum, can I take Ray for a walk later?" Tommy asked eagerly. Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Martha before answering. "Sure, son. But first breakfast and homework deal," Tommy agreed, grabbing a bowl for his cereal. Meanwhile, Sarah approached her mother, speaking softly. "Everything okay, Mum? You seem thoughtful." Martha hesitated for a moment. "Everything's fine, dear. It's just, these dogs make me a bit uneasy sometimes." Sarah frowned, but before she could respond, the kitchen door opened and John, her husband, entered. At 45, he was a tall, good-humored man, always with a smile on his face. "Good morning to the most beautiful family in the world," he exclaimed, giving Sarah a kiss and ruffling Tommy's hair. "Dad, are you taking me to soccer practice this afternoon?" Tommy asked between spoonfuls of cereal. "Of course, champ. But first, how about we take Sunshine and Ray for a walk? They seem full of energy today." Tommy's face lit up. "Yay, let's go, let's go." Martha observed the family scene with a mix of affection and apprehension. She loved her family more than anything, but something about that dynamic with the dogs bothered her in a way she couldn't explain. After breakfast, the whole family, except Martha, gathered in the garden. The morning sun bathed the lawn, creating an almost magical setting. Sunshine, with her gleaming golden coat, ran in circles around everyone, while Ray, still a bit clumsy, tried to keep up with his mother. Tommy laughed loudly, running with the dogs. "Look, Mum, Ray is getting faster." Sarah smiled, watching her son play. She couldn't help but notice how Tommy's eyes sparkled when interacting with the animals. For him, Sunshine and Ray were more than just pets. They were family members, confidants, and adventure companions. John joined in the fun, pretending to be caught off guard when Sunshine jumped towards him. "Hey, Missy, you'll knock me over like that." From inside the house, Martha watched everything through the living room window. Her heart was torn between the joy of seeing her family happy and an inexplicable feeling of discomfort. She sighed deeply, moving away from the window and heading to her room. There, sitting in her favorite armchair, Martha picked up an old photo album. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The yellowed pages contained memories of a lifetime, but there was one photo in particular that always made her pause. It was an image of herself as a child, hugging a dog. The animal had brown fur and seemed to be smiling at the camera. Martha ran her fingers over the photo, feeling a pang in her heart. "Buddy," she murmured to herself, the name coming out like a sigh heavy with emotion. Meanwhile, in the garden, the fun continued. Tommy had grabbed a ball and was now playing with Ray, who was trying, without much success, to catch it with his small jaws. "Look, Dad," Tommy shouted excitedly. "He almost got it that time," John laughed, ruffling his son's hair. "He's learning fast, champ. Soon he'll be stealing the ball from you." Sarah watched the scene with a smile on her lips, but her mind was partially focused on her mother. She couldn't help but notice how Martha seemed distant lately, especially when the dogs were around. "Honey," she called to John, "have you noticed anything different about my mom?" John paused for a moment, reflecting. "Now that you mention it, she's been a bit quiet. More than usual, I mean." Sarah nodded, biting her lower lip. "I'm worried. I think I'll talk to her later." The morning passed quickly, and soon it was time for lunch. The family gathered again in the kitchen, with Sunshine and Ray resting in their beds in the corner of the living room. Tommy couldn't stop talking about Ray's feats during playtime. "Grandma, you should have seen. He almost caught the ball several times." Martha smiled gently at her grandson, but Sarah noticed that the smile didn't reach her eyes. There was something there, a shadow of sadness or worry that she couldn't decipher. After lunch, while Tommy and John were getting ready to go to soccer practice, Sarah decided it was time to have a talk with her mother. She found Martha on the back porch, looking at the horizon with a distant gaze. "Mum," Sarah called softly, sitting down next to Martha, "is everything okay? You've seemed a bit distant lately." Martha turned to her daughter, her eyes revealing a mix of emotions. For a moment it seemed like she was about to open up, to tell something that was weighing on her heart. But then, as if she had changed her mind at the last second, she just smiled weakly. "Everything's fine, dear. I'm just a little tired, that's all." Sarah wasn't convinced, but before she could insist, she heard Tommy calling from outside. "Mum, Grandma, come see what Ray learned." The two women got up and went to the garden. There they found Tommy teaching Ray to shake hands. The puppy, eager to please, extended his small paw to Tommy, who rewarded him with a treat. "Look," Tommy exclaimed proudly, "he learned super fast." Sarah smiled, genuinely impressed. "That's wonderful, son. He really is very smart." Martha observed the scene in silence. Her gaze alternated between her radiant grandson and the small puppy, who was now looking at her with his big brown eyes. For a brief moment, something seemed to change in her expression, as if a distant memory had been awakened. But before anyone could notice, Martha turned and went back into the house, leaving behind an increasingly worried Sarah and a Tommy, completely absorbed in his new achievement with Ray. The day continued, with the family routine following its course. But beneath the surface of normalcy, something was about to change. Martha's repressed emotions, Sarah's concerns, and Tommy's unconditional love for the dogs were intertwining, creating a complex web of feelings and unrevealed secrets. As the sun began to set, painting the Millbrook sky with shades of orange and pink, the Anderson family prepared for another night. But what they didn't know was that the following days would bring challenges that would test family bonds and reveal long-hidden truths. Sunday dawned overcast in Millbrook, the sky heavy with grey clouds that seemed to reflect the emotional climate in the Anderson home. Martha woke up early as usual, but her movements were slower, heavier. She headed to the kitchen, preparing coffee with mechanical gestures, her mind far away. Sarah entered the kitchen, surprised to see her mother already up. "Good morning, Mum, you're up early today." Martha nodded without turning around. Sleep didn't come easy last night. Sarah hesitated, sensing there was more behind those words. She approached, placing a gentle hand on her mother's shoulder. "Mom, are you sure everything's okay? You know you can talk to me about anything, right?" For a moment it seemed like Martha was going to open up. Her shoulders tensed and she took a deep breath. But before she could respond, a noise from the garden caught both their attention. "Ray, come back here, you little rascal!" It was Tommy's voice, mixed with joyful barks. Sarah approached the window, seeing her son running after the puppy who had something in his mouth, apparently one of Tommy's sneakers. "Oh, those two," Sarah laughed, but her smile faded when she saw the tense expression on her mother's face. "Mom?" Martha shook her head as if trying to shake off an uncomfortable thought. "It's nothing, dear, just that puppy worries me sometimes. He's so restless." Sarah frowned. "He's just a puppy, Mom. He's still learning." I know," Martha sighed. "But he doesn't stay still for a minute. What if he hurts someone or himself? Mom, Sunshine is always keeping an eye on him, and so are we. You don't need to worry so much." At that moment, John entered the kitchen, yawning. "Good morning, my darlings. What's all the commotion outside?" Ray got hold of Tommy's sneaker, Sarah explained, laughing. They're playing catch now. John joined them at the window, observing the scene with a smile. Ah, it's good to see Tommy so active early in the morning. These dogs were the best thing that happened to him this year. Martha moved away silently, busying herself with breakfast preparation. Sarah noticed the movement, exchanging a concerned look with John. The rest of the morning passed without incident. Tommy finally recovered his sneaker, albeit a bit slobbery, and spent the time playing with Sunshine and Ray in the garden. Martha stayed inside, alternating between reading a book and discreetly observing the activities in the garden. After lunch, while Tommy and John were preparing to go to soccer practice, Sarah decided it was time to try another conversation with her mother. She found Martha in her room, sitting in her favorite armchair, leafing through an old photo album. "Mom," Sarah called softly, "can I come in?" Martha looked up, seeming a bit surprised. "Of course, dear. Come in." Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, facing her mother. "What are you looking at there?" "Oh, just some old photos," Martha replied, her tone trying to sound unconcerned, but Sarah could sense an underlying tension. "Can I see?" Martha hesitated for a moment, but then handed the album to her daughter. Sarah carefully flipped through it until her eyes landed on a particular photo. It was an image of Martha as a child, hugging a brown furred dog. "Mum, I didn't know you had a dog when you were little," Sarah said, surprised. Martha was silent for a few seconds, her eyes fixed on the photo. When she spoke, her voice was heavy with emotion. "His name was Buddy. He was my best friend for many years." Sarah looked at her mother, feeling she was about to discover something important. "What happened to him?" Martha took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, they were misty. He passed away when I was 12 years old. It was very sudden. One day he was there playing with me in the backyard, and the next—" Her voice faltered, and Sarah quickly moved to sit beside her mother, holding her hand. "Oh, Mum, I'm so sorry. It must have been terrible for you." Martha nodded, wiping away a tear that escaped. "It was. And the worst part is that I felt guilty for a long time. The night before, I had fought with him because he destroyed my favorite book. I was so angry that I sent him outside. If I had known it would be the last time—" Sarah hugged her mother, feeling her body tremble slightly. "Mom, you were just a child. There was no way you could have known." "I know, but since then I've always been afraid of getting too attached to another animal. Ray, he reminds me so much of Buddy, so full of life, so playful. And Tommy, the way he looks at that puppy." Suddenly, many things made sense to Sarah. Her mother's discomfort with the dogs, especially with Ray, wasn't antipathy, but fear. Fear of getting attached, fear of losing again. "Mom, I understand now. But you know, Ray and Sunshine, they've brought so much joy to our family, especially to Tommy. Maybe it's a chance to create new happy memories." Martha looked at her daughter, a small smile forming on her lips. "You think so?" "I'm sure. And we're here with you, all of us." At that moment, they heard a knock on the door. It was Tommy, his face flushed from playing. "Grandma, Mom, you need to see what Ray learned. He's sitting when I tell him to." Martha and Sarah exchanged a look, and for the first time in days, Sarah saw a genuine sparkle in her mother's eyes. "Let's see then," Martha said, getting up. The 3 generations of the Anderson family headed to the garden, where Sunshine watched attentively while Ray, proud, sat obediently at Tommy's command. "Look, Grandma, isn't it incredible?" Tommy exclaimed, beaming. Martha observed the scene, feeling something melt inside her. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by a warm sensation, one she hadn't felt in a long time. "Yes, it is, my dear," she answered, her voice soft. "It really is incredible." As the afternoon sun bathed the garden, the Anderson family shared a moment of connection. Martha, little by little, felt the barriers she had built over the years begin to crumble. It was a slow process, but there in that moment, with her daughter by her side and her grandson playing happily with the dogs, she felt a spark of hope. The day was coming to an end, but for the Andersons, it was as if a new chapter was just beginning. Martha's revelations had opened doors for long-needed conversations, and the family was preparing unknowingly for the challenges and joys that the coming days would bring. As everyone retreated inside, Martha cast one last look at the garden. Sunshine and Ray were lying side by side, their tails moving lazily. For a brief moment, she saw the overlaid image of a brown dog, her faithful buddy, and felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. With a soft sigh, she closed the door, leaving behind the garden bathed in twilight, but taking with her a new determination. The past still weighed heavily, but the present offered possibilities for healing and reconciliation that she was, finally, ready to explore. Monday arrived with a cool breeze in Millbrook, bringing with it a sense of new beginnings for the Anderson family. Martha woke up earlier than usual, her heart a little lighter after the conversation with Sarah the day before. She headed to the kitchen, determined to prepare a special breakfast for the family. While cutting fruit for a salad, Martha heard a soft sound coming from the living room. Curious, she quietly approached the door and saw Ray, the puppy, trying to climb onto the sofa. The little dog seemed determined, jumping and slipping several times before finally managing to settle on the seat. For a moment, Martha stood still, observing. Part of her wanted to scold the dog for climbing on the furniture, but another part, a part she had suppressed for a long time, found herself smiling at the puppy's perseverance. "Ray," she called softly, surprising herself. The puppy perked up his ears, turning his head towards her with curious eyes. Martha hesitated for a moment before slowly approaching. "Come here, little one," she said, cautiously extending her hand. To her surprise, Ray didn't hesitate. He jumped off the sofa and trotted happily to her, wagging his tail. Martha bent down, allowing the puppy to sniff her hand. When he gave a gentle lick to her fingers, she felt something inside her melt a little more. "Good boy," she murmured, lightly patting the dog's head. "Grandma." Tommy's voice caught her by surprise. She stood up quickly, feeling almost guilty, as if she had been caught doing something forbidden. "Good morning, dear," she said, trying to maintain her composure. "You're up early today." Tommy smiled, his eyes shining with excitement. "It's because I'm taking a picture of Ray to show at school today. The teacher asked us to talk about our pets." Martha felt a twinge of concern. "Oh, really? And are you taking him to school?" Tommy laughed. "No, Grandma. Just the picture. But I wanted to take a new one this morning, in the garden. Can you help me?" Before Martha could answer, Sarah appeared in the living room, already dressed for work. "Good morning, family. Tommy, don't forget you have a dentist appointment after school." "Oh, Mom, I had forgotten," Tommy grimaced. "Can I bring Ray to wait for me in the waiting room?" Sarah exchanged a quick glance with Martha before answering. "Son, I don't think that's a good idea. The office might not allow animals." Tommy looked disappointed but nodded. "Okay, but can I at least take the picture with him before going to school?" "Of course, my love. Go get ready while I prepare breakfast, and then we'll take the picture, okay?" While Tommy ran to get dressed, Sarah turned to her mother. "Everything okay, Mom? You woke up early today." Martha hesitated for a moment, her eyes drifting to Ray, who was now playing with a toy in the corner of the room. "Everything's fine, dear, just thinking about some things." Sarah smiled gently, noticing a subtle change in her mother's attitude. "How about helping me with breakfast? Tommy will need extra energy to handle the dentist today." The two women headed to the kitchen, working in silent synchrony to prepare the meal. The aroma of fresh bread and freshly brewed coffee soon filled the house, attracting John, who entered the kitchen adjusting his tie. "Good morning, my flowers," he smiled, giving Sarah a kiss and hugging Martha. "What a wonderful smell." Breakfast passed in a light atmosphere, with Tommy talking animatedly about his school project and how he could hardly wait to show Ray's picture to his classmates. After the meal, everyone gathered in the garden for the impromptu photo session. Sunshine, always attentive, watched closely while Ray ran in circles around Tommy, barking cheerfully. "Calm down, Ray. The photo will be all blurry like this." Tommy laughed, trying to get the puppy to stay still for a moment. Martha, who had been observing from a distance, surprised everyone by approaching. "Let me try, Tommy," she said, her voice soft but firm. She knelt on the grass, ignoring the fact that her dress might get dirty, and called Ray with a low whistle. To everyone's amazement, the puppy stopped immediately, his ears perked up, completely focused on Martha. "Now, Tommy," she instructed, "call him gently. Tommy obeyed, and Ray trotted calmly to him, sitting by his side as if he had done it 1,000 times before. Sarah, mouth agape, quickly took the photo with her cell phone. "It's perfect," she exclaimed, showing the image to everyone. In the photo, Tommy smiled radiantly, with Ray sitting obediently by his side, his golden fur shining under the morning light. "Grandma, how did you do that?" Tommy asked, amazed. Martha smiled, a nostalgic glint in her eyes. "Let's just say I had a good teacher a long time ago." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the school bus horn. Tommy quickly hugged Ray, grabbed his backpack, and ran to the gate, but not before giving Martha a tight hug. "Thank you, Grandma, you're amazing." As the bus drove away, Sarah turned to her mother, curiosity etched on her face. "Mom, that was incredible. Where did you learn to do that?" Martha sighed, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "With Buddy," she answered softly. "He was stubborn sometimes, but he always responded well when I used a calm and firm tone." John, who had been watching the scene with a mix of surprise and admiration, placed a gentle hand on Martha's shoulder. "Well, it looks like you haven't lost your touch." The rest of the morning passed quickly. John left for work, and Sarah, who worked from home as a graphic designer, set up in her makeshift office in the living room. Martha, for her part, found herself spending more time in the garden, observing Sunshine and Ray with new eyes. Around noon, the phone rang. It was from Tommy's school. "Mrs. Anderson?" a female voice asked when Sarah answered. "This is the school office. There was a small incident with Tommy during recess." Sarah's heart raced. "Is he okay?" "What happened?" "He's fine, don't worry. But it seems he got into an argument with another student about dogs. Things got a bit heated, and Tommy ended up pushing his classmate." Sarah closed her eyes, sighing. "I see. Is he in trouble?" "Nothing serious, but we'd like you to come pick him up a little earlier today. The principal would like to talk to you." "Of course. I'll be there in half an hour." After hanging up, Sarah quickly explained the situation to Martha. "Mom, can you keep an eye on the house while I go get Tommy? It shouldn't take long." Martha nodded, a concerned expression on her face. "Of course, dear. I hope it's nothing serious." As Sarah hurried out, Martha found herself alone in the house, except for Sunshine and Ray. She walked to the window, watching the two dogs playing in the garden. "Oh, Tommy," she murmured to herself. "What have you gotten yourself into, my dear?" The house fell into a tense silence, broken only by the occasional cheerful barks from the garden. Martha found herself reminiscing about her own childhood, the mischief she had gotten into, often because of Buddy. A sad smile played on her lips as memories long buried began to resurface. While waiting for Sarah and Tommy to return, Martha decided to do something she hadn't done in years. She went to the living room cabinet, took out a dusty photo album, and sat on the sofa. Carefully, she opened the album, letting the memories of a simpler, more innocent time envelop her. The yellowed pages told the story of a girl and her dog, a pure and true friendship. And there, alone in the room, with the distant sound of Sunshine and Ray's play in the garden, Martha allowed the tears she had held back for so long to finally fall. The sound of keys in the lock pulled Martha out of her reverie. She quickly closed the photo album, wiping her eyes with the back of her hands. The door opened, revealing Sarah and Tommy. The boy entered with his head down, avoiding his grandmother's gaze. "Tommy, go to your room, please," Sarah said, her tone firm but gentle. "We'll talk soon." As soon as Tommy went upstairs, Sarah collapsed on the sofa next to Martha, letting out a long sigh. "Oh, Mom, what a day." Martha placed a comforting hand on her daughter's arm. "What exactly happened?" Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, composing herself. Apparently, Tommy was showing Ray's picture to his classmates during recess. One of the boys, Luke, started saying that purebred dogs are problematic and that adopting mixed breeds is better. Tommy got defensive and, well, things heated up. Martha frowned. "And he pushed the other boy?" "Yes," Sarah confirmed. "It wasn't anything serious, but the school has a strict policy against any form of physical aggression. Tommy will be suspended for 2 days." A heavy silence hung over the room. Martha found herself looking at the garden, where Sunshine and Ray were now resting peacefully under the shade of a tree. "You know," Martha began, her voice low and thoughtful, "this reminds me of something that happened to me when I was about Tommy's age." Sarah turned to her mother, curious. Really? What happened? Martha smiled sadly. I also got into a fight at school because of Buddy. A girl said he was ugly and stupid because he was a mutt. I got so angry that I threw my lunch at her. Sarah couldn't contain a surprised laugh. Mom, I never imagined you doing something like that. Well, Martha chuckled softly. I was grounded for a week. But you know, looking back, I understand why I reacted that way. Buddy was more than a dog to me. He was my best friend, my confidant. I think Tommy must feel the same way about Ray. Sarah nodded, thoughtful. You're right. These dogs have become part of the family so quickly, but still Tommy needs to understand that he can't resolve things with violence. Of course not, Martha agreed, but maybe we can use this situation as a teaching opportunity. At that moment, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Tommy appeared, still with his head down, but clearly curious about the conversation. Tommy, come here, Sarah called. The boy approached cautiously, sitting between his mother and grandmother. Son, Sarah began, I understand that you wanted to defend Ray, but pushing your classmate wasn't the right way to handle the situation. Tommy nodded, tears forming in his eyes. I know, Mom. I'm sorry. It's just, when Luke started bad-mouthing purebred dogs, I got so angry. Ray is so special to me. Martha surprised everyone by speaking. Tommy, dear, your grandmother also went through something similar. The boy's eyes widened. Really, Grandma? Martha then told the story of her fight at school because of Buddy. Tommy listened attentively, alternating between expressions of surprise and understanding. The lesson I learned, Martha concluded, is that our love for animals is something beautiful, but we need to find better ways to express it and defend it. Violence is never the answer. Sarah, moved by her mother's unusual openness, added, and you know, Tommy, sometimes people have different opinions about pets. That doesn't make them bad people. The important thing is to respect differences and, when possible, educate with kindness. Tommy was silent for a moment, absorbing the words. I understand. I guess I should apologize to Luke, right? Yes, that would be the right thing to do, Sarah agreed. And who knows, maybe you could invite him to meet Ray someday. Sometimes meeting an animal in person can change people's opinions. Tommy's face lit up at the idea. Can I really? That would be awesome. Martha smiled, feeling a wave of affection for her grandson. You know, Tommy, your passion for animals reminds me a lot of myself when I was young. It's something precious. We just need to learn to channel it in the right way. Tommy turned to his grandmother, his eyes shining with curiosity. Grandma, can you tell me more about Buddy? What was he like? Martha hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the memories. But looking at her grandson's eager face, she realized it was time to share these stories. Of course, dear. How about we go to the garden? We can take Ray and Sunshine, and I'll tell you all about Buddy. The three headed to the garden, with Tommy running ahead to call the dogs. As they settled on the grass, with Sunshine lying lazily next to Martha and Ray playfully chewing on a stick, the atmosphere seemed lighter, more hopeful. Martha began to tell stories about Buddy, how he would wait for her every day at the school gate, how he managed to open the refrigerator by himself to get treats, and how he once saved the neighbor's cat from getting stuck in a tree. Tommy listened, fascinated, asking questions and laughing at Buddy's antics. Sarah watched the scene with a mix of joy and emotion, realizing how much her mother was opening up, healing old wounds in the process. As the afternoon progressed, the conversation flowed naturally, moving from stories of Buddy to the adventures of Ray and Sunshine. Tommy told about how he taught Ray to shake hands, and Martha, to everyone's surprise, offered some training tips she remembered from her youth. At one point, John arrived home from work, finding the family gathered in the garden. He joined them, bringing a tray with fresh lemonade. So, he asked, serving the glasses, how was your day? Tommy looked nervously at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. The boy then told his father about the incident at school, the suspension, and the conversation they had. John listened attentively, his expression serious but understanding. I see, champ, I'm glad you learned from this. You know, standing up for what we believe in is important, but there are ways and ways to do it. I know, Dad, Tommy replied. Grandma told me about when she was little and also got into trouble because of her dog. I guess we both learned our lesson, right, Grandma? Martha laughed softly. Yes, dear. It's never too late to learn. The conversation continued animatedly, with stories being shared and laughter echoing through the garden. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Martha found herself reflecting on how things had changed in such a short time. Just a few days ago, she had felt distant, almost alienated from this family dynamic. Now, sitting there, with Sunshine resting her head on her lap and Ray running in circles around them, she felt a connection she hadn't experienced in decades. Sarah, noticing her mother's contemplative look, leaned in and whispered, "Everything okay, Mum?" Martha smiled, a genuine and warm smile. "Yes, dear. Better than I've been in a long time." As night fell over Millbrook, the Anderson family remained in the garden, united not only by blood ties, but by a deeper understanding and a shared love, both for each other and for the animals that had become an integral part of their lives. And there, under the first stars beginning to dot the sky, Martha felt that she was finally finding her way back home, a home that included not just her human family, but also the furry companions who had won her heart. Tuesday morning brought with it a shy sun peeking through the clouds, as if wanting to check on the changes in the Anderson house. The day began with a different energy. There was a purpose in the air, a sense of anticipation that was contagious to everyone. Martha woke up early, her mind already planning the transformations they would make in the back room. As she went down to the kitchen, she found Tommy already awake, drawing something in his notebook. "Good morning, Grandma. I was making some drawings of how Ray and Sunshine's room could look," he explained, showing his childish but detailed sketches. Martha leaned in to get a better look, smiling at her grandson's enthusiasm. On the paper were colorful drawings of cushions, toys, and even a small shelf that, according to Tommy's notes, would be for storing the dog's special things. "Look," Tommy pointed to a corner of the drawing. "I thought about putting a picture of Buddy here too, so he can watch over them from up there, like a canine guardian angel." Martha felt her heart tighten, but in a different way. It was no longer that sharp pain she used to feel when thinking about Buddy, but something softer, almost comforting. "It's a beautiful idea, dear," she replied, running her hand through her grandson's hair. "In fact, I think I have something special we can use." Going up to her room, Martha opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years. From it, she retrieved an old brown leather collar, well preserved despite the time. It had been Buddy's. When she returned to the kitchen, she found Sarah preparing breakfast. "Mom, what collar is that?" "It was Buddy's," Martha replied, her voice steady. "I thought we could hang it in the new room along with some photos, as a reminder that love for animals has always been part of our family." Tommy looked at the collar with reverence, as if it were a sacred relic. "Can I hold it, Grandma?" Martha handed the collar to her grandson, watching as he examined it carefully. At that moment, Sunshine and Ray entered the kitchen, attracted by the movement and smell of coffee. "Look at that," Sarah commented. "It seems they know we're planning something special." The morning passed quickly between preparations and planning. John, before leaving for work, promised to bring some tools to help with the room transformation. Sarah rearranged her schedule to be able to participate in the project. After lunch, the whole family gathered in the back room. It was a spacious room that for years had served only as storage for old things. Martha observed the space with new eyes, seeing beyond the dust and stacked boxes. "Where do we start?" Tommy asked, eager to begin work. "First, we need to clean and organize," Sarah replied. "Then we can think about decoration." While sorting through what would be stored or donated, Martha found an old wooden box. Upon opening it, she discovered several old photos, including some of Buddy that she thought had been lost. "Look at this," she called to the others, showing the photographs. "Here's Buddy on the day he came home, and this one was taken on my 12th birthday." Tommy and Sarah came closer, curious. The black and white photos told a story of love and companionship that transcended time. In one of them, Buddy appeared lying in exactly the same flower bed where the sunflowers were now planted. "It's as if everything is connected," Sarah observed softly. "The past and the present meeting in such a special way." The work continued throughout the afternoon. John arrived home early from work, bringing not only tools but also some surprises. A new bed for each dog and a soft, durable rug for the room. "I thought our furry friends deserved something special," he smiled, as Sunshine and Ray excitedly investigated their new gifts. As the room took shape, something magical seemed to happen. It wasn't just a space being transformed, but hearts opening up, memories being reframed. Martha supervised everything with a watchful eye, occasionally suggesting changes or sharing stories inspired by some found object. In a particularly touching moment, she decided to hang Buddy's collar next to a photo of him, creating a small memorial. "You know," she said to Sarah, who was watching her with misty eyes, "for a long time I thought keeping these memories was too painful, but now I understand that they are part of who we are, of our history." Tommy, who was helping John assemble a shelf, paused to listen. "It's like the sunflowers, right, Grandma? They keep the seeds from the previous year so new flowers can bloom." Martha smiled, impressed by her grandson's wisdom. "Exactly, dear. And sometimes we need help to realize that." As night began to fall, the room was practically ready. The walls, once empty, now displayed a harmonious combination of old and new photos, Buddy alongside images of Sunshine and Ray, creating a visual timeline of the family. The new beds were strategically positioned, with Ray's close to Sunshine's, reflecting the special bond between mother and son. Toys were organized in colorful baskets, and a fresh water fountain was installed in a corner. But the most special detail was a small vertical garden that Martha suggested creating on one of the walls. "This way they'll have a little bit of the garden inside too," she explained. When they finally finished, everyone paused to admire the result. Sunshine and Ray had already taken ownership of the space, lying comfortably in their new beds as if they had always been there. "I think they approved," John laughed, observing the relaxed dogs. "It's not just them," Martha replied softly. "You know, I spent so much time trying to keep my distance, afraid of getting attached again, but look at what I was missing." Sarah hugged her mother, feeling how much she had changed in the last few days. "Sometimes we need to lose something precious to learn to value what life offers us afterward," she said. "And sometimes," Martha completed, watching Sunshine and Ray, "we need a little nudge from fate to open our hearts again." The family remained there for a few more moments, contemplating not just the transformed room, but also the changes that had occurred in each of them. It was as if that space represented something bigger, a new chapter in their lives, where the past and present met in harmony. Outside in the garden, the sunflowers had not yet sprouted, but everyone knew it was just a matter of time. Just as the planted seeds needed time to germinate, Martha's heart was, little by little, blooming again. Wednesday dawned with a light drizzle in Millbrook, creating a silver veil over the Andersons' garden. Martha woke up earlier than usual, concerned about the newly planted seeds. As she went down to the kitchen, she found Sunshine sitting near the back door, as if standing guard over the flower bed. "Good morning, girl," Martha murmured, surprising herself with the naturalness with which the words came out. Sunshine wagged her tail in response, her gentle eyes fixed on the lady. While preparing coffee, Martha heard a familiar sound coming from the garden, Ray's cheerful barks. Approaching the window, she saw the puppy running in circles around the fenced flower bed, apparently fascinated by something. What could he have found, she wondered, putting on a light jacket and going out to check. To her surprise, Ray had discovered a small bird that had landed near the flower bed. The puppy, instead of chasing it, maintained a respectful distance, barking softly as if trying to start a conversation. "He's different, isn't he?" A sleepy voice sounded behind her. It was Tommy, still in his pajamas, hair tousled. "Different how, dear?" Martha asked as her grandson joined her on the porch. "He doesn't chase other animals like most dogs. It's like he wants to be friends with everyone," Tommy explained, proudly watching his furry companion. Martha smiled, suddenly remembering something. "You know, Buddy was like that too. Once he made friends with a rabbit that lived in the neighbor's yard. Every day at the same time, the rabbit would come to the fence and the two would stay there, each on their side, just keeping each other company." Tommy looked at his grandmother with bright eyes. "Really, Grandma? And what happened after that?" "Well," Martha chuckled softly, "the neighbor ended up building a small passage in the fence so they could play together. It was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen." At that moment, Sarah appeared at the door, already dressed for work. "Good morning, family. Tommy, don't forget that today you have to write that essay about what you learned from the incident at school." Tommy sighed but nodded. "Yes, Mom. Can Grandma help me?" Martha and Sarah exchanged a surprised look. "Of course," Martha replied, feeling a wave of affection for her grandson. "We can work on it after breakfast." Breakfast passed quietly with the family gathered around the table. John, before leaving for work, commented on how different the garden looked. "There's something special there," he said, looking out the window. "It's not just the flowers that are about to be born, it's as if the whole space was more alive." Sarah smiled, squeezing her mother's hand over the table. "It's true. Sometimes the most important changes start with small gestures." After breakfast, while Sarah settled into her makeshift office, Martha and Tommy sat in the living room to work on the essay. Sunshine and Ray lay nearby, like an attentive audience. "So," Martha began, "what do you want to write about?" Tommy thought for a moment. "I want to talk about how I learned there are better ways to defend those we love. Like you did yesterday, telling stories about Buddy instead of getting angry with Ray for digging in the garden." Martha felt a lump in her throat. "You know, Tommy, sometimes adults need to learn these lessons too. I spent a long time keeping my stories, my feelings to myself because I thought it would be easier that way. And now, Grandma, is it easier to talk about Buddy?" "It still hurts a little," she admitted, "but it's a different kind of pain. It's like watering a garden after a long drought. Sometimes the soil gets so hard that the water takes a while to penetrate, but when it finally does, it brings new life." Tommy began to write, his words flowing with wisdom beyond his years. He wrote about love, about understanding, and about how sometimes the most important lessons come from unexpected places. As they worked, the rain outside increased a bit. Ray, startled by a distant thunder, jumped into Martha's lap, shaking slightly. Instead of pushing him away, she began to hum softly that same old lullaby. The puppy gradually calmed down, nestling in her lap, as if that had always been his place. "Grandma," Tommy called softly, "I think he likes the song as much as Buddy did." Martha continued singing, her hands automatically caressing Ray's soft fur. Sunshine approached too, lying at her feet, creating a circle of comfort and protection. The morning passed quickly, with Tommy finishing his essay and Martha sharing more stories about Buddy. Each shared memory seemed to lighten the weight she had carried for so long. During lunch, Tommy read his essay to the family. He had written about how animals teach us to be better people, about how love can manifest in different forms, and about how sometimes we need to lose something precious to learn to value what we have. Sarah couldn't hold back tears as she listened to her son's words. John, usually more reserved, also seemed moved, but it was Martha's reaction that surprised everyone the most. "Tommy," she said, her voice firm despite her misty eyes, "you helped me understand something very important. Sometimes when we lose someone we love very much, we close our hearts for fear of suffering again. But doing that is like preventing a garden from blooming for fear of the rain." "Like the sunflowers, Grandma?" Tommy asked. "They need the rain to grow, even if sometimes it comes with thunder that scares them." "Exactly, dear, and you know what? I think it's time to make some changes around here." Everyone looked at her, curious. "How about we transform that empty room in the back into a special space for Sunshine and Ray, with comfortable beds, toys, a place just for them inside the house?" Tommy's face lit up. "Really, Grandma? You'd allow that?" "Not only would I allow it, but I want to help decorate," Martha smiled. "After all, they've already conquered their space in our hearts. It's only fair that they have their space in the house too." Sarah hugged her mother, feeling that something fundamental had changed. It was as if a long-closed door was finally opening, letting in new light, fresh air, and endless possibilities. The rain outside was starting to diminish, and a stubborn ray of sunshine broke through the clouds, illuminating the garden. The sunflower bed, though still without visible sprouts, seemed to pulse with life and promise. As Martha had said, sometimes the most important changes start with small gestures. And on that rainy Wednesday, in a house in Millbrook, a family was discovering that love, like flowers, always finds a way to sprout and grow even in the most unlikely places. Thursday brought with it a timid sun that peeked through the clouds, as if wanting to check on the changes in the Anderson house. The day began with a different energy. There was a purpose in the air, a sense of anticipation that was contagious to everyone. Martha woke up early, her mind already planning the transformations they would make in the back room. As she went down to the kitchen, she found Tommy already awake, drawing something in his notebook. "Good morning, Grandma. I was making some sketches of how Sunshine and Ray's room could look," he explained, showing his childish but detailed drawings. Martha leaned in to get a better look, smiling at her grandson's enthusiasm. On the paper, there were colorful drawings of cushions, toys, and even a small shelf that, according to Tommy's notes, would be for storing the dog's special things. "Look," Tommy pointed to a corner of the drawing, "I thought about putting a picture of Buddy here too, so he can watch over them from up there, like a canine guardian angel." Martha felt her heart tighten, but in a different way. It was no longer that sharp pain she used to feel when thinking about Buddy, but something softer, almost comforting. "It's a beautiful idea, dear," she replied, running her hand through her grandson's hair. "In fact, I think I have something special we can use." Going up to her room, Martha opened a drawer she hadn't touched in years. From it, she retrieved an old brown leather collar, well preserved despite the time. It had been Buddy's. When she returned to the kitchen, she found Sarah preparing breakfast. "Mom, what collar is that?" "It was Buddy's," Martha replied, her voice steady. "I thought we could hang it in the new room along with some photos, as a reminder that love for animals has always been part of our family." Tommy looked at the collar with reverence, as if it were a sacred relic. "Can I hold it, Grandma?" Martha handed the collar to her grandson, watching as he examined it carefully. At that moment, Sunshine and Ray entered the kitchen, attracted by the movement and smell of coffee. "Look at that," Sarah commented. "It seems they know we're planning something special." The morning passed quickly between preparations and planning. John, before leaving for work, promised to bring some tools to help with the room transformation. Sarah rearranged her schedule to be able to participate in the project. After lunch, the whole family gathered in the back room. It was a spacious room that for years had served only as storage for old things. Martha observed the space with new eyes, seeing beyond the dust and stacked boxes. "Where do we start?" Tommy asked, eager to begin work. "First, we need to clean and organize," Sarah replied. "Then we can think about decoration." While sorting through what would be stored or donated, Martha found an old wooden box. Upon opening it, she discovered several old photos, including some of Buddy that she thought had been lost. "Look at this," she called to the others, showing the photographs. "Here's Buddy on the day he came home, and this one was taken on my 12th birthday." Tommy and Sarah came closer, curious. The black and white photos told a story of love and companionship that transcended time. In one of them, Buddy appeared lying in exactly the same flower bed where the sunflowers were now planted. "It's as if everything is connected," Sarah observed softly. "The past and the present meeting in such a special way." The work continued throughout the afternoon. John arrived home early from work, bringing not only tools but also some surprises. A new bed for each dog and a soft, durable rug for the room. "I thought our furry friends deserved something special," he smiled, as Sunshine and Ray excitedly investigated their new gifts. As the room took shape, something magical seemed to happen. It wasn't just a space being transformed, but hearts opening up, memories being reframed. Martha supervised everything with a watchful eye, occasionally suggesting changes or sharing stories inspired by some found object. In a particularly touching moment, she decided to hang Buddy's collar next to a photo of him, creating a small memorial. "You know," she said to Sarah, who was watching her with misty eyes, "for a long time I thought keeping these memories was too painful, but now I understand that they are part of who we are, of our history." Tommy, who was helping John assemble a shelf, paused to listen. "It's like the sunflowers, right, Grandma? They keep the seeds from the previous year so new flowers can bloom." Martha smiled, impressed by her grandson's wisdom. "Exactly, dear. And sometimes we need help to realize that." As night began to fall, the room was practically ready. The walls, once empty, now displayed a harmonious combination of old and new photos. Buddy alongside images of Sunshine and Ray, creating a visual timeline of the family. The new beds were strategically positioned, with Ray's close to Sunshine's, reflecting the special bond between mother and son. Toys were organized in colorful baskets, and a fresh water fountain was installed in a corner. But the most special detail was a small vertical garden that Martha suggested creating on one of the walls. "This way they'll have a little bit of the garden inside too," she explained. When they finally finished, everyone paused to admire the result. Sunshine and Ray had already taken ownership of the space, lying comfortably in their new beds as if they had always been there. "I think they approved," John laughed, observing the relaxed dogs. "It's not just them," Martha replied softly. "You know, I spent so much time trying to keep my distance, afraid of getting attached again, but look at what I was missing." Sarah hugged her mother, feeling how much she had changed in the last few days. "Sometimes we need to lose something precious to learn to value what life offers us afterward," she said. "And sometimes," Martha completed, watching Sunshine and Ray, "we need a little nudge from fate to open our hearts again." The family remained there for a few more moments, contemplating not just the transformed room, but also the changes that had occurred in each of them. It was as if that space represented something bigger, a new chapter in their lives, where the past and present met in harmony. Outside in the garden, the sunflowers had not yet sprouted, but everyone knew it was just a matter of time. Just as the planted seeds needed time to germinate, Martha's heart was, little by little, blooming again. As Friday dawned, there was a palpable sense of accomplishment in the Anderson household. The newly transformed room for Sunshine and Ray had become the heart of the home, a physical representation of the emotional journey the family had undertaken over the past week. Martha woke early, as had become her new habit. She made her way downstairs, pausing briefly at the door of the dog's room. Inside, Sunshine and Ray were still sleeping peacefully, curled up together on one of the new beds. The sight brought a warm smile to Martha's face. In the kitchen, she found Sarah already up preparing coffee. "Good morning, Mum," Sarah greeted, her voice soft. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in years," Martha replied, surprising herself with the truth of the statement. "I think I'm finally at peace with some old ghosts." Sarah nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her mother's words. "I'm so glad, Mum. It's been wonderful seeing you open up this week." As they sat down with their coffee, Tommy bounded into the kitchen, full of energy despite the early hour. "Morning, Mom. Morning, Grandma. Can we check on the sunflowers today?" Martha chuckled. "Of course, dear, but remember it might take a little while before we see any sprouts." "I know," Tommy said, his enthusiasm undimmed, "but I want to make sure they're okay after the rain." After breakfast, the three of them made their way to the garden. The morning air was crisp and clean after the recent rains, and the soil in the flower bed looked rich and moist. There were no visible signs of growth yet, but Martha knelt down, gently touching the earth. "The seeds are doing just fine," she assured Tommy. "They're gathering strength underground before they push through to the sunlight." Tommy nodded seriously. "Like how you kept your memories of Buddy safe for all those years, Grandma, and now they're helping new happiness grow." Martha and Sarah exchanged a look of amazement at the boy's insight. That's exactly right, Tommy," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're a very wise young man." As they stood there, Sunshine and Ray came bounding out of the house, full of morning energy. Ray immediately began sniffing around the flower bed, while Sunshine watched him with what could only be described as maternal patience. "They really do make a great team," Sarah observed, "just like our family." The rest of the morning passed in a comfortable rhythm. Sarah worked from her home office, while Martha and Tommy engaged in various activities around the house. At one point, Martha found herself alone in the living room, looking at the family photos on the mantelpiece. There was a new addition, a picture of all of them, including Sunshine and Ray taken in the garden just the day before. As she studied the photo, Martha felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. A week ago, she had been closed off, afraid to let love in. Now she felt as if her heart had expanded, making room not just for the memories of Buddy, but for the joy that Sunshine and Ray brought to their lives. In the afternoon, John came home early from work. "I thought we could all go for a walk in the park," he suggested. "It's a beautiful day and I think our furry friends would enjoy the outing." The idea was met with enthusiastic agreement from everyone. Soon they were all heading out, with Sunshine and Ray on their leashes, tails wagging excitedly. At the park, they found a quiet spot near a small pond. While John and Tommy played fetch with Ray, Martha sat on a bench with Sarah, watching Sunshine explore the area. "You know," Martha said, her eyes following the golden retriever's movements, "I used to come to this park with Buddy. We'd sit right here, watching the ducks on the pond." Sarah squeezed her mother's hand. "And how does it feel to be here now?" Martha was quiet for a moment, reflecting. "It feels right," she finally said, "like I'm honoring Buddy's memory by creating new memories here. He would have loved Sunshine and Ray, I think." As the afternoon wore on, the family gathered together on a blanket for a small picnic they had packed. Ray curled up next to Tommy, while Sunshine lay her head on Martha's lap. Looking around at her family, human and canine alike, Martha felt a sense of completeness she hadn't experienced in decades. "I want to thank you all," she said suddenly, causing everyone to look at her. "This week has been transformative for me. You've helped me remember that love isn't a finite resource. Opening my heart to Sunshine and Ray hasn't diminished my love for Buddy. If anything, it's made those memories even more precious." There were tears in Sarah's eyes as she hugged her mother. John nodded, a warm smile on his face, while Tommy beamed with pride, feeling he had played a part in his grandmother's journey. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, the Anderson family made their way home. The walk back was filled with laughter and conversation, punctuated by the happy barks of Sunshine and Ray. Back at the house, as everyone settled in for the evening, Martha took one last look at the garden before closing the curtains. The flower bed where the sunflowers were planted seemed to shimmer in the twilight, full of promise and potential. "Just like us," Martha murmured to herself, a contented smile on her face. She knew that, like those seeds, she too was on the verge of a new beginning. The past week had been the rain she needed to soften the hardened soil of her heart, and now, with the love of her family and the joy brought by Sunshine and Ray, she was ready to bloom once again. As she turned away from the window, Martha felt a sense of anticipation for what the future might hold. The journey of healing and growth she had begun was far from over, but for the first time in years, she was looking forward to each new day and the adventures it might bring. With a heart full of love and gratitude, Martha joined her family in the living room, ready to embrace whatever life had in store for them next.